Perl, the practical extraction and report language developed by Larry Wall in 1987, continues to live on. It certainly was my first language that I used extensively, building websites and tooling in my first tech jobs. Perl 5 came out in 1994 and we're still using it today. MCP servers, on the other hand, they're relatively new. The Model Context Protocol was developed by Anthropic in 2024, and it was an open standard for connecting AI assistants to different data sources. In 2025, Anthropic donated MCP to the Agentic AI Foundation, or AIF, which is under the Linux Foundation, if you know them better. And it really took off. We started to see that used by OpenAI, Gemini, Copilot. All the different AI systems support MCP. Gemini, which originally came out as Bard, is Google's multimodal AI. We hear Gemini all the time. The Gemini LLMs are now ubiquitous throughout the whole Google landscape. What's most interesting to me is Gemini CLI, which came out in June of 2025, their Agentic AI CLI, as well as Anti-Gravity, which came out in November of this past year. And that's an IDE based on VS Code with integrated Gemini 3. Now, there are great patterns for creating MCP servers. You can see all sorts of examples in NodeJS and JavaScript, Python, like with Fast MCP, Golang, and other modern languages. But what about Perl? I mean, I love Perl. Can we do Perl? Could we develop an MCP server using Perl? Could we make it do things besides hello world, like leverage information in a Google spreadsheet, or maybe an agentic chatbot with n8n? Maybe we could pull these sessions from a demo spreadsheet, or maybe we could ask users, would you like to book me for a speaking engagement, and be able to put that. Or how would we use n8n to have a full flow that would use Vertex AI, an MCP server we control, and simple memory storage? In today's session, we're going to create a Hello World MCP server using Perl, so you get a basic understanding. We're going to add in Google Workspace integrations. We're going to Dockerize it, making a Dockerfile, and show how to build that, and share it on Dockerhub. We're going to set up the Kubernetes manifest. I'll use helm, and I'll show you how that works, and host it locally so I can have an ingress to it. Though there are ways to do this without having a Kubernetes cluster. Lastly, when we feel very comfortable with that, we're going to show how to create an n8n workflow that creates a chatbot that can engage with spreadsheets in various ways. We're going to show some usage in Copilot, Gemini CLI, and the Anti-Gravity, as well as the n8n chatbot. And all the code when I'm done will be shared in Codebird, and the containers will be in Dockerhub, as well as my own Harbor CR, which is hosting the cluster over there. Well, I hope you're as excited as I am. Let's dig in. Let's begin. So we have a couple prerequisites we need to sort out first. Make sure you can do Docker. It's okay if you do sudo docker ps. Sometimes I have to do sudo, but make sure you have Docker installed. The other one we want to do is make sure we have Perl installed. So Perl 5, any of the Perl 5s would be more than good enough. And lastly, because we'll do some testing with npx, I want to make sure I'm using LTS-jod, which is the latest stable. So I'll say nvm install LTS-jod. If I haven't, it'll say I already have. And you can do nvm use LTS-jod. Fantastic. All right. So we're clear. We have our basics. Let's go ahead and make a directory. We'll say Perl MCP for demo. Sounds good. MCP for demo. Then we could immediately start going into a code editor. This tends to be how I work. We could also just do it with by. So one thing we're going to do is create a cpan file. Cpan file. And here we're going to need a couple of dependencies. So the ones I will be using are basically, we need a modulus lite, we need the MCP server one, and this is just making sure that we have at least a minimum version of Perl if anybody else uses our code. Looks good. Next, what we can do is do a cpan install. So we'll say here is cpan sudo cpan-m install deps dot, and it'll find that file and install it. Looks like the end of this is missing a semicolon. That's fine. That looks a lot better. And dependencies are installed. Next, we're going to go ahead and create that Perl file. So one of the things I like to do is, before I get too far along, because we'll eventually want to do Docker, or we'll want to put this into a Git repo, is I'll go to TopTool and get something that has like Perl and Perl 6 and Linux. And let me go ahead and make a git ignore file. Git ignore. That's saved, so I now have a pretty decent git ignore. And let's also just do git init. So git branch -m main. I have a basic main branch. I haven't added any files, right? So it's still showing these first ones. So my next step is to get that server. So let's go ahead and create a server file. So we'll do by server.pl. What you're going to see here is I'm using the Modulicious Lite with signatures, the MCP server. I create a new one, and I'm going to create a new tool. It's going to say echo, and the description is echo the text input. As far as the type goes, we want to take in a message, and that is required. It's going to return and echo the message. Right? We'll say return echo hello world, and then the args. Anything at the /MCP will start. We haven't provided any ports, so we'll do the default 8080, and we're good. There you see that server file all defined. What's next? Well, to just get going, before we do anything with Docker or anything else, we can go ahead and start. So I'm going to fire it up, and it's going to be the daemon of production. This is the whole Modulicious part. And then it's going to be listening on localhost 8080. Now, how am I going to test it? At this stage, let's go ahead and create a new Ubuntu nvm use lts jod. And what we really want to do is launch the inspector. The installer can be run with npx. So if I say npx model context protocol inspector, this will fire up into whatever browser is being used. Proxy server port is in use. All right. Oop, I had another window running it. Let's try that again. Now it's going to fire up. It just popped off screen, but I'll bring it over here. Is the MCP Inspector window. So here we see the MCP Inspector window, and we can connect. Now, we are running on port 8080. So let's go ahead and give that a try. Not HTTPS, it's just local. Local host 8080/MCP. It is streamable. We're gonna connect. We'll go to tools. This tools. Here's echo. Say YouTube. We'll do run tool. You see echo HW YouTube. This tells us our MCP server is working in the most basic sense. That's great. How fast was that we've just created an MCP server? We can come back here and kill the server, and if I refresh, we'll find we can't connect. It's disconnected. Now my next step is to create a Docker file. I don't think I really want to run this locally all the time. So let's go ahead and make a Docker file that we can use for this. So you'll see we'll do Perl 534, create a service app, copy the files over, do cpan-m install, which is the same thing you saw us do before. The key thing we're going to do here is we're going to do star 8080. This means it'll listen on all interfaces. So there's our Docker file. So we do docker build -t my test 0.1. This is going to build the Docker file. I'll just pause till it's done. Now that it's done building, and it did take a couple moments, we can do a run. So we can do docker run -d -name We'll call it Perl MCP 3. And we'll go a port of 80, we'll say 8089, just to be unique, with a destination of 8080. And we'll do this exact container name. Let's copy and paste it. I'm not going to do -d. I don't want to do daemon. I'll just do right here. So it's now listing on 8080, but I'm really listing on 8089. I'm still running this, so let's say 8089 and connect. And just like this, we can list the tools, see the echo now in Docker. Run the tool. See, look, now we're in Docker. So that's fantastic. Control C. I find it doesn't always kill cleanly. So Perl MCP. We'll just make sure Docker stop. Docker. Whoa, that's funny. Docker RM. There, it's gone. It's not running. It's not taking up that port. So now we have a Dockerfile that's working. And this might be a time before I start messing around with Google Sheets to do an init, right? When we look at the code we have so far, it's pretty good. It's a good hello world. So we'll do git add -a, git commit, init, our first working hello world with Dockerfile. And great. I feel pretty confident with this file so far. Now I'm going to need to have a Google Cloud credential if I want to talk to things in Google Cloud. So the purpose of this demo, let's just make an all brand new one. Now my project that I have available, it's called My Anthos Project 2. You'll probably have something different. Let's go ahead and create a new service account. So it's Google Cloud IAM, service accounts create, and we're going to call this Perl HW test. And I'll give it a display name, don't have to, but it's sometimes nice. Service account for YouTube on Perl MCP, that way I can find it later. And I'll say -- project and refer to that project that I just set. And that's pretty good. That's going to go ahead and create that service account for me in my GCP. So I have a Perl HW test already created. Now I'm going to want to get that email address, so I can go ahead and filter on that. So I can say Google Cloud, I can go ahead and filter on that. And I want to use the same display name I just said, service account for Perl MCP. And this is going to give me this email. I'm going to need this email in just a minute. So it's good to have that email handy. I now need to create some account keys that I'm going to be using for this account. So we'll do Google Cloud service account keys, create credentials JSON, and then my IAM account that I want is this one we just saw right here. So let's copy and paste that to the clipboard. And then we can also say the same thing, project, and it's that same project, $my project ID. So now what you're going to see is there's a credentials JSON. One thing I want to do right now before I do anything else, at the end of this, say credentials.json does not get checked in. So you'll see the get ignores there, but the credentials file isn't having any chance of getting checked in. So we have a Google Sheet, right? We want to be able to connect to a Google Sheet. So let me bring up a Sheets. Google Sheets here. And let's say this demo project sheet, okay? I need that email account. Where did I have it? Right here. So I'm gonna copy that email account to the clipboard. I'm gonna say share. And I'm gonna share that. Now I'm gonna do editor because later on we're gonna write stuff that can write to it. And I don't need to notify people. They don't need to get an email address. So this sheet here is now shared with that service account. But now I want to actually do one last thing. Forgot about this. So let's say that this was one that burned me. Now I already have it enabled, but it could get you. So say you're in Google Cloud. And what you want to do is look for the Google console. Google Sheets API. You need, if it's not saying enable, click enable right here. Mine says manage because I've already enabled it. But I had endless troubles when I first did this because I created the service account. I had given it access to my sheet, but I neglected to enable the Google Sheets API in my GCP account. So make sure you take care of that. All right. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and write the code for the Google Sheets API. So we'll do by server.pl. So what we've done here is added a few different things. Data dumper, which is going to let us just dump files. I use data dumper all the time. I mean, for all my life using Perl. It's a great way to just see the output. JSON is going to become more and more useful to us as we parse things out of headers. HTTP request, URI code, LWP user agent, and this is the key one, the Google Cloud Auth service account. That's going to let us talk to things. That we're going to be using the REST API for most things. So let's go through the code here. All right. You can see I need to use two scopes, spreadsheets and drive, which both came from this API. I'm going to create a new auth and I'm going to look for that credentials JSON stored locally. I'm now going to go ahead and log some nonsense, but get the auth token, and I want this sheet right here. So this sheet should match the one I just did. Make that a little wider. Ends in JZA. So there's my sheet ID. You find it right here in your Google Sheets URL. And max sheet letter is Z, and the max sheet cell number is 100. It's just how many I'm going to return. I'm going to say read the spreadsheet cell, and then render it the output. Now here's the code for rendering the cell. I'm going to do new URI encoder, get the value range. A to Z just means the whole, that's walking it from A all the way to the end. And you can see here's the REST API, the sheets, googleapis.com, spreadsheets, and now here's where we get the sheet ID and the cells to get. You see the sheet ID that was passed in, and the value range, which came together from A to Z. Now, if it's not a success, I'll just return the line. Otherwise, I'll decode the JSON, I'll step through the rows, and for each row and header, I will go ahead and talk about this. And now I'm making a final hash. Now, this is very much an Isaacism. This is something I've been doing forever. I love to just make essentially a variable at the beginning of my project and start to stash data in it with pointers. So for the values, I'm doing row index, and then for headers, I got column index and column, the headers column index equals the row for that column index. So I'm starting to stuff all of these values in there. It'll make more sense when I print it. And then I'm going to print out the dumper. So this is the output, and then return the values, the first values, and the status line. Here's the content for doing the request. It's very simple, really, this Google Drive GET request. It's a request new for GET for the URL, passing in the headers, and I do a user agent request. So this is very much Perlism for doing a web request. Here you can see some of the tokens that I put in here, and there's the bearer token for authorization. So I think I've walked through this pretty well. The other piece that we're going to need to do is update the CPAN file. So the CPAN file at this point is going to need to be updated. So let's open that up. What you're noticing that I did here is we already had these two right here. But then I went ahead and I added service account, URI encode, LWP protocol, HTTPS, and onDevelop stayed the same. So if we want to test it, again, this is where we could test it with Docker or test it locally. I'm going to go ahead and do the cpan m installer to get anything that was missing. And if I had anything missing, it would do it. Then we're going to go ahead and launch the Perl. Let's go up to the Perl. There you go, there's the server. And I'm going to launch this inspector. Go back to 8080. And we'll reconnect. 127.80.80 localhost. I fixed that one bug by just changing get here to any, so it would listen. But it doesn't really help with the API. But I'll show you how that works. Now that I have it set to any, and I fire it up on 8089, and I try to connect to it. Right here. Well, it's not responding properly. I can see I actually fetched all the details from that Google Sheet. So the Google Sheet came back with the Perl MCP 2000, the third row there, and spit it all back. So I know the connectivity works, but I'm not really happy with the code. So we're going to stop that for now. What I'm going to do instead is bring up the code. I've launched this into VS Code, and I want to change a few of the things. Some of the things I'd like to change here are that I don't like this code here that just kind of reads a random cell and gets it back. Also, it seems to just be listing on slash. I want it to really list on /MCP. So let's rewrite the code a little bit here, and I'm going to show you as I go along. This updated version adds a few more things, like a save feature, which I'm not really using, some strict and warnings. Most of it's the same, but you can see I'm going to want to go ahead and allow a password in debug mode so that I can turn on and off some verbosity when I'm trying to use the sheet. Next, I have a tool here. In fact, let's do a view word wrap so we can see all this. My tool is going to fetch one row, okay? So there's one row that we can fetch and just specify it. We're going to go ahead and have a search value and a search field, and we can find a row in there. So there's your range and the columns to search on. The other thing you're going to see here is it's going to pull the credentials file, but if they pass in a credentials file, if I have this in a Docker, I could have the credentials file mounted, right? Because it's kind of hard to mount a file into where your app layer is in Docker. It's far easier to reference a file in a different folder that we could use with the config map. So here you can see the credentials file. It says, hey, if I have a /creds directory, let's grab the credentials file from there instead. Otherwise, I'll just look next to me for development. As far as the usage path goes, if we have a password set, then I'm gonna let them in. If not, I'll reject it. That way, I don't turn something on in Kubernetes or Docker that anybody in the world can go ahead and bang on. We're gonna fetch the range. So far, this is very much the same. We're gonna return the search value and its contents, okay? And if it says 403, you're not allowed. And actually, we'll never get the 404 because it'll be 403 or it will return contents. Here's the full Google Sheet. And the reason I made another Google Sheet as opposed to all the rows is the query for getting a full Google Sheet's a lot easier. And I'm going to show you that read Google Sheet raw. So I get my creds. Again, this is all kind of copy paste the same thing. I have the range. If passed, here's the Google Sheets raw. And we're going to go ahead and look at it. So here's the search. In my search, I'm going to have a little pattern matching for equals tilde. That's the Perl way of saying, does this field match? That way I can kind of hunt down one row out of a sheet. Otherwise, the raw one is really simple. Look how tight this code is right here, okay? I'm going to get the sheet. Only the values here, the range is going to be the whole thing. So get the Google Drive request, and then just decode the JSON and spit the thing back out. Here's my request. Here's my headers, and you'll notice I listen to any on /MCP. This will make a far more accurate MCP server. I really haven't changed the cpan file, so this should be all it takes to run. Let's move that off to the side. Let's launch it again with 8089. And now where's that MCP server of mine? Or the reviewer. Here, we'll pull this up. MCP Inspector. Let's connect. It'll be MCP. And now we're connected. When I list tools, you're going to notice I have a row and a full sheet. I set no password, so I shouldn't need a password because I'm local. I'm going to leave the range default, but I do need the sheet ID. So what was my sheet ID? Let's look that up. Here it is. We're going to grab this whole code here. And now let's paste it in here and run the tool. We're going to see that this has now pulled in the full Google Sheet as data that an AI tool could use. I'm actually pretty happy with this. Let's try the other feature. Do clear list tools. We'll do a row. So in this case, my search field is going to be, let's say, session. All right. Search field of session. And my search value is going to be, I'm really interested in this one, the Perl MCP 3000. So let's find Perl MCP 3000. And I still want to use the same sheet ID. So let's grab that sheet ID right here. Run tool. And here we can get the output, and it's just showing me that one session. So it's the date, the Perl MCP 3000, I found my row. This is actually a pretty useful tool at this point. It fetches sheets and gets the values. I like it, so let's go ahead and do stop. And this time I'm gonna do a Docker build. But the only difference with my Docker build this time is I'm gonna go out to Dockerhub. ID Johnson, my hardware test 01, but this is gonna be 02. And Docker push that up to Dockerhub. So I expect this step to take a while, so I'll pause it. And now you can see it is pushing up to Dockerhub. We now have it up in Dockerhub, so we can just refer to this in an image. So let's try that. We'll do Docker run -d, a name of, actually don't we have it saved in our cache. We'll do Docker run -d. Only this time we can use the full reference. It would pull it if it didn't run, but now it's in the background. So if I do Docker PS and grab for Perl, there you can see it's running, listening to 8089. And let's go ahead and test it. We're gonna reconnect. We're connected. We'll do tools, list tools, and see that it is working. And it pulled in our credentials. So without a password, if this was actually running in Cloud Run or something else, people would go ahead and use my credential to access things, which may not be the best idea. Now, part of what I told you we would do is test this in Gemini CLI. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Gemini extension, Gemini extension.json file. And I'm going to create a new file here. We're going to call this Perl HWMCP. We'll do a 1.0 version. And here, we're going to say localhost 8089, that's what I set it to, /MCP. So this really only works locally, but it will work. My next step is going to be to add the link. So let me do that is Gemini. Let's get our full path there. Gemini extensions link home builder workspace Perl MCP for demo. That's really all I need is the full path. Remember that whole NVM use LTS job. I'll try again. Now, why would Gemini not be found? Did I misspell it? Perhaps because I just upgraded NVM. Let's go ahead and reinstall it. It's not there. This will definitely add it. And here we can see it's installed. So let's try that again. Gemini extensions link. Yes. So now let's do Gemini. So let's do MCP list. And here's my Perl MCP. There we go, with 2 tools. How amazing. So let's try a little experiment. Let's say I would like to know which dates are booked for sessions already in the Google Sheet. Let's get that Google Sheet. Get that in my clipboard. The Google Sheet. This one. Using the Perl MCP server with the fetch Google Sheet tool. Please just list the range of start and end. Let's give it a try, see if it works. Again, we didn't have a password, so I don't need to do a password with this one. Say yes, allow for the session. But Gemini is the one that's getting all the information back. It's now going to see the JSON output, and now has made a calculated response to us to say that I have sessions booked from January to March of this year. How fantastic is that? Using the what was the name of that one? I'll let it figure it out. In the Perl MCP server, please use the appropriate tool to search for the session Perl MCP 3000 and tell me the project ID associated to it. So what I'm hopeful it'll do is find the search rows and come back with session 3. Because I'm trying to use it as an information store. Well, session 3. So now you can see we have successfully used our MCP server currently running to query a sheet. And all we had to do was share access to the principal here. And that gave it the access to it. Now, if I wanted to do password, because I'm going to share it, I might say export. What was the password variable we gave it? Just a second here. Export password equals my password 1234. And let's also turn on debug. So I said MCP debug equals 1. That'll give us a lot of output in our command prompt if we're not getting access. And now let's do the Perl command to run it. I already have it running right now in Docker. I forgot about that. So I'll do Docker stop Perl MCP 3. Well, how would I do that in Docker? So remember I did Docker run. Docker run. What we're going to say instead here is -e MCP usage password equals password 123 -e for environment variable MCP debug equals 1 same port, etc. Remember this 3 Docker 3. Try that again. Now it's running. Now let's try this locally. We're going to reconnect. We'll do tools. We'll do fetch Google Sheet. Let's give it that sheet ID. But no password was set, right? We have to give it a password. But if I use the password I said, password 1234, now I get my output. And this will still work exactly the same way. So if I go back to Gemini, now let's see, I've been as explicit as I possibly can. This time it figured it out. and we got our output. So there, it actually proves something with these AI tools is sometimes they just are too smart for their own goods, and they don't think that through. And unfortunately, the project associated with 3000's 03, I don't care about that one. I asked about 2000, and that's the right session right there. Okay, so at this point, let's pause. We've successfully gotten our app running. We've searched Gen AI. We've connected to our sheets. We've fetched rows. We've run it in Docker. We pushed to Dockerhub. Let's show Dockerhub before we wrap this little section. Dockerhub. Go to Dockerhub. Sign in. And here's our O2 tag that anybody could pull from. All right, when we come back, what we're going to do is tackle the Kubernetes manifest, doing write to sheets, and I'll show you that code. And then we're going to explore it with Copilot and anti-gravity as well. Welcome back. We're going to go a little faster this time around. And what I want to show you is an example of moving things from a no password to a header, as well as updating the charts and showing the code that would write to the file. All right, so one of the things that you're gonna notice is I'm gonna change this Gemini extension to be an ingress that I control. Now, this is where it's kind of funny. I may not want my Perl MCP to be the same one anybody else uses. So when you're using this, the Gemini extension, you could say my MCP on example.com or whatever your URL that you're using. I happen to be using steep.icu. That's where my code is hosted. So I will have it hosted at Perl MCP. Next, I found that the password, by using password, was having a lot of troubles. Once I got into API tools, I was starting to note, use this for the password. But then when I recorded some pictures or I was trying to share with others, it was spewing all over the place saying, all right, I'm going to log in and I'm going to use your password. It would say it out. Well, that's a terrible experience if anybody's over your shoulder or using the tool to have a secret password come back out. And I really hated that. So I decided that the better approach is to use a header to send in an API key. Let's look at the charts. The charts are actually pretty simple. So here's my chart. I have a Perl MCP chart and I have various values. So one of the nice things with the values file is I can go ahead and set a password here, and the default is no password. So I say, if you say no password is the password, then there's no password. I'm sorry, it's a little redundant. But this is a way to turn off passwords. I also have by default the debugging to off. Here's the example ingress where you can go ahead and create it. So like an ingress class of Nginx or the cluster issuer can be set here. And you can turn on TLS for ingress. And I will show you my values file that has ingress enabled. You can tweak your resource limits. And again, here's a liveness probe and readiness probe. Now these are going against the port that it's hosted on, not necessarily what I'm ingressing through. Finally, I mount the credentials in here as an actual secret. So that's a step to the side. That's secrets. I'm not going to pass it to the Helm chart because if I did that, it would spit it back out later. Not exactly a good experience. Now, one of the nice things is you can just touch a file and send it up and make it an invalid credentials if you want to publicly expose it and force people to use their own credentials, like a bring your own credentials system. All right. So here's our values and then our templates. You'll basically know we have a deployment. This is pretty cut and dry deployment code. Looks like I still have the port in here called COBOL HTTP. I should fix that. My ingress. Here we see the ingress and the hosts and the ports. And here's my horizontal pod autoscaler, my service definition. Again, it's because I copied it from another one of my projects. And then here, in fact, let's do this. Let's just fix it because it's kind of bothering me. What we're gonna do here is do find the folder, COBOL, and switch to Perl, and do a replace all. Come on. Place all. Charts. Files good. Find that string. Find that string. Replace all. Why didn't it do it? So So this is where it's very nice to know your command line tools. So I can do terminal, go to CD workspaces, CD Perl MCP, charts, and that dash type f dash exec, grep, cobol, sed dash I, grep sed dash I, cobol MCP with Perl MCP G. Perl HTTP. There we go. When you can't get find and place to work in VS Code, do it from the command line. And so there's my chart. And since I changed it, I actually always bump up the values for safety. Next, let's take a look at the Dockerfile. Some of the things you're going to notice here is I added some of these environment variables as default. That wasn't there the last time we talked. Other than that, everything's the same. 8080, it's the cpan install. The cpan example hasn't gotten any different. I did create a node port example in case people want to use node port, because not everybody has a proper ingress controller. And then lastly, let's look at values. Here you can see I have a values file with the values, debug turned on, and here's what my ingress actually looks like. So you can see going to Perl MCP, and I have all my annotations. I really need this one so that the GCP Cert Manager kicks in and gives me a proper TLS. As far as resource limits, I'm still probably going to nail those down with Goldilocks. But right now, this is pretty much it. I didn't change the worksheets of the server. And let's look at the server code lastly. So we're going to see here, I want more real estate here, is a few optimizations. So one thing is I had to do this, what's called monkey patch. Now I'm going to own the fact that I actually had Gemini CLI help me with this. I did not figure this out myself. But I did find certain old tools won't work until you respond back with a protocol version on a handshake. And that is, technically speaking, part of the MCP protocol. And the default one for Perl doesn't implement it. So what we do is here we monkey patch it in for the handle initialize. And what we do is we hear what they say their version is, and we say, hey, that's our version too. We're just going to respond with our server does the same version. Great. And all these tools that need it, n8n, are going to be happy. This is the same, and now you see the tools coming here. Now, one more thing you're going to notice is I have some auth bits that are handles. You'll say get authenticated service account and clean up credentials. As I implemented all my tools, I found myself copying and pasting these lines a whole lot, and it really was better to kick them out to another. Here's how you can see my debug goes. As I'm going through the code, I print out things if the debug's greater than 0. And because Perl is a pretty fun language, the way you do that is you cast it by saying +0 to make it numeric. That's my little string to number conversion. Pro tip with Perl. So we see we have a tool for appending a row to a Google Sheet. We have one for fetching a Google Sheet row, same as before. No real difference other than to clean up that auth bit. The fetching Google Sheet is no different other than to clean up that auth bit. And now I have an update Google Sheet. This is a little bit unique. And what I did is I wrote a lot of content in here on the description to trigger the AI tools to know how to use it. Because I need them to say arrange with a sheet ID for a row they'd like to overwrite. So they can kind of do raw or user enter to also set the types. So this is how we're kind of inserting rows when we need to insert rows. Again, there's that auth bit to create it and to clean up. Also, the auth bit is so that when they pass in a credential, I save it to a file, and the cleanup bit is I would never, ever want to persist somebody else's credential in this file, because otherwise it wouldn't be safe to use. You wouldn't be able to trust it if somebody kept the credentials hanging out. Here's my get authenticated service account. So basically I have a credentials file, which may or may not be valid. So if I'm publicly available, I'm going to nix the file and make it invalid. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save. If they've passed in an argument of credential, they've passed the bring your own credentials, then I'm going to go ahead and do the epoch time plus some random number to save it in the temp folder with the epoch time and random numbers of JSON and use it. Now I have that credentials file going and I'll use it. In the cleanup, I'm going to go in there and do an unlink, which is the Perl-ism for saying delete it from that same global creds file variable. So basically, always delete it when you're done doing your tool operation. The read Google sheet really isn't any different than it was before. Just I cleaned up some of the debug output. The read sheet's no different. Now the append sheet, what you'll notice here is I'm doing the user entered and the insert date option and a request URL, and I had to implement a post. Remember the other one was get. There's your post right there for a post request. There's the batch, and we're going to get to that API header. Don't let me forget to show you the API header because we were doing password before. So there's a send Google link. Here's the post request. And so really what you'll notice here is the request type is post versus get. Get versus post. On that, pretty much the same duck. Now here's the little smarts for the whole password. Instead of having a password field that I'm passing in, which is dangerous, if the team has set a password on this project, then I'm going to look for a header called XAPI key and then check that and reject calls if it's unauthorized. Now the reason the header is so much better is not only can we use header over here where our authentication can be via header, but this works far better when we add it to things like n8n. And then we start the app. Really simple stuff. Now this is already out there, Docker built and pushed to Dockerhub. Dockerhub is version 1.4. All right, but I would like to use it now. So how do I use it? So here you can see I have a Gemini CLI, a Gemini extension for Perl MCP, the actual ingress with MCP, and I have an XAPI key with the password goes here. And if I ever forget what the password is, I can pull it from my helm values where it will show up plain text. Now, I don't actually want to share with you my password because I'm using this on a public endpoint. But I'm going to get that password and save it over into the Gemini CLI. So let me tell you that real quick. Actually, it just dawned on me, I can just rotate the password. So here's the password. I'll go ahead and edit that in the Gemini extension. And now what I want to do is make sure I add a link to this, to the Gemini. Now part of this is to avoid getting confused. We're going to do Gemini MCP list. This gives the list without actually starting up Gemini. What I want to do is remove the one that's currently linked to our first draft. That was my problem. You got to say it with extension, not MCP. Now let's do a list. Buggers. Wow, that's annoying. To the MCP list, use the exact words here, and then extension uninstall. And now we're finally, finally better. All right, let's go back to adding this. We'll do MCP. Let's try again. Gemini extension link, Perl MCP. And now it's linked. So let's go ahead and fire up Gemini. Now I have a sheet here, and I have sessions that go up to 3.20, okay? So I'm gonna say, here's my sheet. I'd like to use the Perl MCP server with the sheet ID of this and append new session rows for the dates of March, I don't know, March 25th to June 10th. Use creative names for the session names and just add the next appropriate number for the project IDs. Now we don't have to worry about auth because I set that XAPI auth key in the Gemini extension, so it's already pre-authed. So we're going to see how smart it is. Is it going to figure out that it needs to get some sheets and figure out the columns? My hope is it's going to invent a bunch of new rows that come at the bottom of this sheet. So the append should cue it into what tool to do. So it's going to fetch Google Sheet. That's pretty smart. That's going to give it the full history. We can see the auth is working. Crafting some data. Append. So create a bunch of new sessions. Let's see. Boom. I can see that now my sheet is filled with new rows. And it appropriately added sessions. That's fantastic. All right, well, how would we add this in Copilot? So chat here. I'm in Copilot. I'm in agent mode. So what I want to do is click on Configure Tools and click on the MCP icon. Here I'm going to say HTTP and my location HTTPS is the ingress URL that we used before. Perl MCP steeped.icu MCP. We're going to call this Perl MCP Server. And the remote means I'm just going to be launching this on WSL as opposed to Windows. I find Windows gets a little funky. Let's see, it creates an entry here. But we're kind of missing a little auth bit here. It's not going to work without that auth API. What we're going to want to say here is type HTTP is correct and the URL is correct. What I need now is a headers. For headers, is XAPI key and it all caps, not that I know that that matters, and I'm going to give it that same value I did before, just like that. And here's how we know if it works. I've set the headers and the XAPI key and the URL is appropriate. I'm going to do start. What isn't it like? Unknown word. I don't care about that. All right, see 4 tools? This already tells me it's working. You don't see the tools if it can't connect. All right, so now we're going to do a similar thing. I'm going to be using Claude Haiku. Let's say, I'll leave it Claude Haiku. I'm in the free tier of Copilot, so I only get so much work per month. Say, I would like to read the sheet. I would like to use Perl MCP Server to, let's see here, to update the sheet ID, same sheet ID, and let's see here, set all the active fields to no. How about that? We're just gonna set them all to no. So see if it can't read them and then reinsert them all from yeses to nos. So say go. Let me take a quick moment here. I tried to debug this many times using different models and different ways. I even switched over to a full Linux host laptop but I always got the same error about needing a type of items. I plan to debug this later, but let's move on to the Continue.dev plugin and see how that works. Now let's dig into n8n. We promised we'd do that, so let's do it. Now we turned off the password just so we could do the Continue.dev testing. So here I'm going to turn the password back on by upgrading my helm chart. So now we're going to see if the containers are ready to go. There, that one's rotated over, so we should be good to go now with the password. So let's bring up n8n. We're going to go ahead and look at the Perl MCP one here. And what we can see is I have a few things going on here. I've set this one to the Ollama chat model, so I can actually use Ollama locally, though it's a little on the slow side. And for my MCP, I'm going to go to the MCP server, and what you'll see is I have an auth header account. So while I can't view this, I can change it to what I know the key to be. It should be this password right here. So let's grab that to the clipboard. And we'll make sure to paste it in here. Save it. And one of the ways I always test is, can I see the tools? What we're getting here is a bit of an error. Let's close that. Double click it. Auth. Header auth streamable. Selected. I can't figure that out. See, that was a simple mistake. The values file had no password. The back file had the password in there. So now let's see that rotate. So it was running without the password because that's how we had to do it for the Continue.dev. Should rotate over pretty quick. So the new one shows its liveness. It's going. Now the new one's running. Fantastic. All right, let's go back to n8n. All is selected. Now I can see the rows. That tells me that it's working. Fantastic. I have password back on, office pass on, and now I can have the chat model. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, my first thing I always do with these AI agents is do a hello. What we're going to see here is I say your job is to ask for the Google Sheet, confirm if they want the whole or specific rows, and then use this MCP server with that tool to fetch, and if they want just a row, use the fetch tools. I'm giving a lot of autonomy here to my AI. Nothing's changed in the local model, and as far as Ollama goes, I'm just picking which model I want to connect to. I actually have my local computer here that has a GPU on it, which is a little faster than the other two. But Mistral's not the best model, but let's try. This is Ollama literally running on this computer. So I'll say hello, and that's kicking in. I can actually see Ollama start to really hit my CPU. I can actually see this GPU kicking in. I'm not doing anything 3D right now. I'm going to pause it till it comes back. So that took about 30 seconds to come back. But again, I'm not going out of my network. I'm staying on my computer. So it's asking me for what sheet I want to use. Let's stick with the same sheet we've been using, the one with all of our projects. So I'm going to grab that sheet ID onto my clipboard, and I'm going to say fetch the full sheet with the sheet ID and give me the range of dates. So we'll kick that up. And what you'll notice going on here is the parts that spin are telling me who's working right now. So again, Ollama's kicking up, and it doesn't help the fact that I have my video editor in the background also consuming some CPU and GPU. But it's kicking in and doing some work. And then what I'm going to see happen in a minute is it pop over here. So I'm going to pause it. You keep an eye on this running time so you can see how long I paused it for. Right there at about 2-minute mark, it just zipped through and jumped all around. I didn't even have time to pause it. But it gave me some notes and it gave me some answers. Again, all using the Ollama. So how do I switch it to Vertex? So let's bring this down. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete this connection. Instead, I'm going to go over to Vertex. So here you can see I've done my Anthos project. I have found, for whatever reason, and I've even updated n8n multiple times, that this really should work for 3.0 Pro and 3.0 Flash. I'm authenticated, I can get it back from my list, but something about the current n8n Docker that's out there in the Community Edition doesn't seem to be updated for 3.0. So 2.5 works, just annoying that I can't seem to use 3.0. I prefer to use 3.0 Flash. So there's the model, and my service account is defined in here. I'm not going to show you the password. So I'll go ahead and close that. All I've done here is reconnected to this model. And by the way, I also have Mistral, so you can use the Mistral cloud. There's a lot of choices in here. Interestingly enough, I tied this into OpenAI through Azure AI Foundry, which I could do, but it didn't work. It was wild how it was not functioning. All right, so we're going to try the same thing. We're going to go up to here. I'm going to reset my chat session, and I'm going to see if I can do the up arrow. Fetch the full sheet. No, I'm not even going to pause it. This thing should go a lot faster. Talks to Google. Google goes to memory. Hey, can you please find range? I want the full sheet, not a range. And it gave me an answer. Now it can append as well. So we can see these dates right here. So let's do a chatbot. Let's say that I want to say, what should we do? Should we add a few more sessions? Add 10 more sessions to the list using random names for the session and properly incremented project IDs. Now I'm going to hit the enter button and see how fast I can go here. So I'm leaving this up because you can kind of see a live update when it works. 2021. And here we have the sheet added. Though it put it kind of in the middle, which is a little odd. But it did. So we have dates, we have sessions, E12 to E21, and yeah, that's the chat. Now if I wanted to publish this, so let's save this. I can publish this. And now that it's published, I can get the URL from the drop down by the chat. It says copy production URL. I paste that in. Now I have a chat. So I say super dude. Can I get the date ranges from the sheet? Put in that sheet ID again. Now behind the scenes, I will see there's an execution going on in just a moment. The whole sheet. And this is the kind of thing you can productize. You can also embed your n8n chat if you don't want to use the URL. And now I have the date range that came back from a chatbot. So this is how I could expose it to my user base with n8n. I've also done some similar ones where I have a form updater. So with this one here, let's take a look at what this guy's about. This one here says, your job is to ask users if they'd like me to present at their user team or conference. If it's outside of Minnesota, then remind them they gotta take care of my travel. And then ask them for the date, and if it's used, ask them for a different date. Now I'm gonna actually use this exact sheet. So if I bring this sheet up right here, you'll see here's my event sheet. So here's the dates I've been booked, who might be booking me. Again, it's all just sample data, mind you. But it's a spreadsheet. And then basically I tell it how to talk about the event in my system and which sheet to use. Let's go ahead and publish this one. Again, I'm using Vertex on this guy just as I did before. We'll do publish. And I'm gonna go ahead and here, copy production URL, paste it in here. Hi, my name is Chuck. How can I assist you today? I would like to book you for presenting at my user group. I'm all excited. Oh, that's great. What would be the date? Let's pick a date that's already booked. Let's say the event date is April 1st, okay? April 1st of this year. Now I've given it a different format than what's in my sheet, right? I said April 1st of this year. In my sheet it says 2026 0401. April 1st, it says 2024. I don't know how it got the wrong year. Let's, again, the live models. The year is 2026, actually. Are you available April 1st, 2026? That's the first time. I've done this thing many times. It's the first time it's made that a mistake. All right, it shouldn't be available. Let's see what happens here, because this shouldn't. The event is Marky Mark and Funky Bunch reunion tour in, let's say, Austin, Texas, and I want you to talk about how Mama is gonna knock you out. The type is music, and the contact would be Mark Wahlberg. I'm not spelling his name. Mark Wahlberg. This one too. And it just popped up in here. Now it's just interesting to me that it didn't detect this date over this date. As I said, live demo time, it has done that before. Let's do a new session. Hi, I'm Chuck. Are you available to speak April 1st? So this time it detected it and got the date right. Can you speak on March 15th? Yeah, okay. I am a user group for, let's say, IBM tooling. It is a meetup for Open Tofu in Edina, Minnesota. I want you to speak on Tofu versus Terraform. My contact info is Joey at 651. Now I've given it pretty much everything I need. Let's see if it just inserts that into my sheet. What year's event on March 15th? You are very confused. 2026. Boom! You see the IBM user group tooling just came up. And obviously I would catch these and confirm with them. But we have a full chat bot defined here. I should figure out why it has the wrong year. And I might even say the year is 2026. So I don't know, though nowadays it feels like 1984, but I'll give that another off to the side. So that is a full use of n8n chatbots, and all I'm doing is the AI Module node. As far as here, you know, I say it's Chuck. You could say anything. It's just for funsies. It's just the message when they first appear here. Oh wow, did we cover a lot today? We looked at creating a Perl MCP server with a hello world. We expanded it to get and reading rows. We showed how to use it with the CLI. We experimented with MCP Inspector. We added passwords and headers. We showed how to use this in VS Code with Continue.dev. We tried to show Copilot, but it gives an error. We then showed it with an n8n chatbot that would read and update rows. And quite frankly, we even tied it into Vertex AI as well as Ollama. So I hope you got something out of this video. This one took me a lot longer than I thought it would, but I really wanted to give you something of value, some chapter markers that could be used. So thank you again for watching. If you like my stuff, like and subscribe. It really helps. You can find me on LinkedIn, Isaac n8n, and stay safe out there.